My name is Tracy Craig. I'll be moderating the meeting. Welcome, everybody. This meeting is Alameda County Department of Environmental Health's community meeting to discuss environmental conditions that need to be addressed prior to redevelopment of the 24th Waverly and Harrison Street project in Oakland. And I just want to go through a couple things. First of all, I want to introduce our presenters tonight. So hi, Tracy Craig, moderating. John Cremani. John, will you raise your hand? He's just helping with technical issues and taking notes. Drew York is the caseworker project manager for the Alameda County Department of Environmental Health. Drew, you want to raise your hand? And then we have Kevin Ma with Holland and Nash, correct? I said that right?
Yes.
And then go ahead, please. I think they might know you.
Oh yeah, I'm sure some of you guys have come across as other meetings that we've had on the project. So good to see everybody tonight, and look forward to hearing your feedback.
Great. And then we also have Steve Ness as well. Okay. Did I get all our project team? I think I did.
I think we did, yeah.
Okay, great. So John, next slide, please. We have a very short presentation tonight. We have a very simple agenda. We have a short presentation where we'll be talking about site conditions, plans for cleanup to address the site conditions, community protection measures. So that's what Alameda County Department of Environmental Health will be requiring during the actual cleanup to make sure that neighbors aren't exposed to dust and dirt and contamination. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. But quite frankly, since this is such a small meeting, we'd love to hear from you throughout the presentation. So ways that you can participate: you can raise your hand with the Zoom function. You can raise your real hand and wave at me, and I'll call on you. You can simply just talk, and we'll stop and answer the question. And if you're one of those people that doesn't like to talk at a meeting, you can chat something. You can type your question in the chat box. So I think that really covers basically the housekeeping. Our presentation is about 15 minutes. We'll save the rest of the time for questions and answers. But again, feel free to speak at any time. So site location, I think everybody knows where the site is at 24th Waverly and Harrison in Oakland. Next slide, John. Property redevelopment. Important to note that Holland and Nash did not contaminate this site, but they are cleaning it up to support redevelopment. I think most folks are familiar with this project, so I won't go through it other than to say that they're voluntarily addressing contamination under the oversight of Alameda County Department of Environmental Health. And that work will be done concurrent with actually the property redevelopment work. Alameda County Department of Environmental Health is our county agency. They're responsible for overseeing the cleanup of contaminated sites. Next slide. And I'm going to turn this over now to Drew York, the project manager for Alameda County. Drew?
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, and thank you everyone for coming tonight and participating. It's great to have community involvement in projects.
Yeah, Drew, I was just thinking we've got such a small group, maybe people want to introduce themselves.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Want to introduce yourselves? No, don't feel like you're on the spot. Nope. Oh, I think you have to unmute.
You're on mute.
Hi, this is Scott McLaughlin with Northgate Environmental. We are the environmental consultant working for Holland on the project.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's Anna by phone. I don't know why, but it says Victor Hugo as me, but I'm here.
Oh, okay, Victoria. No, I'm kidding.
So Anna Nguyen, counsel for Nash Holland.
Great. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. I think that's all the folks that want to talk right now. So go ahead, Drew.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So this slide is actually really important. It shows a lot of the agencies and a lot of the players that are involved in redevelopment. So you have the development team, the developer, which is Nash Holland, and then their environmental consultant, as Scott mentioned, from Northgate Environmental Management, and then they have their general contractor. And then you have regulatory oversight from multiple agencies. Again, I'm with Alameda County Department of Environmental Health. The division is called the Local Oversight Program, or LOP for short. Among other programs in my division, we oversee the development of sites with residual contamination from historical land use. That could mean redevelopment sites with residual contamination from commercial or industrial operations such as foundries, automotive service stations, dry cleaners. We also oversee cleanup of residential home heating oil tanks and things of that nature. Our role is to facilitate the protection of human health in the environment by overseeing subsurface investigations to better understand and essentially to delineate known and also unknown constituents of concern in soil, groundwater, and soil vapor. We oversee the corrective and remedial action measures to protect human health of A, the construction workers, B, the future occupants of the building, and then more importantly, we oversee community and health protection measures to the adjacent surrounding community while the investigations or corrective actions and redevelopment is being implemented at the site. You can see a couple other agencies at the bottom here. City of Oakland, they're in charge of reviewing and approving planning and building permits. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District, they oversee air quality during construction. That's a good thing to kind of differentiate. We oversee things during the corrective action phase or the investigation phase. Once that goes into construction, once the contamination has been removed or remediated or corrective actions have been implemented, then the air quality, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District will oversee the construction will oversee the air quality during construction activities. You also have other agencies depending on the development, and that includes the State Water Resources Board. They oversee stormwater management practices. That would include silt fencing, erosion control, and hay bales and detention ponds. Thanks, John. Next slide. Yeah, as Tracy mentioned before, the site consists of 8 parcels, approximately 0.86 acres. Historical land use on the parcels included, but were not limited to, various residential in the southern portion of the site, and then various commercial configurations, including several automobile service and repair stations. For a summary of the site setting and historical land use for each of the 8 parcels, you can look at that information on the Phase 1 environmental assessment, which is dated November 4th, 2019, and that was prepared by Northgate. That can be referenced on the State Water Board GeoTracker website, which we will provide a link at the end of this presentation. Numerous site investigations have been conducted at the site since 2019 with and without agency oversight in soil, groundwater, and soil vapor. Investigation results identified the presence of elevated levels of metals. Wow, I can't talk tonight. Sorry. Elevated levels of metals, including but not limited to lead, cobalt, and nickel in shallow soil. Soil investigations also indicated the presence of diesel range petroleum hydrocarbons, pesticides, including chloridane, deldrin, and also semi-volatile organic compounds, including compounds such as benzoapyrene and fluoranthrene. Groundwater samples collected across the site indicated that diesel range petroleum hydrocarbons and metals are present in groundwater. And then chlorinated volatile organic compounds were detected in both groundwater and soil vapor, including vinyl chloride and another solvent material called tetrachloroethylene, or PCE, and chloroform in soil vapor. These constituents in these chemicals of concern are found across Oakland. Lead obviously being from aerial deposition of cars before unleaded gasoline, lead-based paints, things of that nature. Solvents are also regularly detected across parts of Alameda County, in most redevelopment sites. And then, other things like the pesticides, obviously those are detected in probably most of the sites that we see in Oakland. So basically, these results indicated that the historical operations, as Tracy mentioned before, predate the Nash and Holland's ownership of the site. This could be from the subsurface chemicals of concern, could be from the various service stations that were there before, especially the petroleum-based constituents of concern. There is fill material at the site. So I think the fill material, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but was observed between 3 to 5 feet below ground surface across the site. So fill material can have a bunch of things in it as well. And then the environmental consultants also hypothesized that there could be some potential offsite sources coming onto the site. So due to kind of these impacts at the site, there's currently underway, there's additional subsurface investigations that were conducted over, I think, this month. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. And those will help inform basically if there are sources and determine where those sources are, and also help inform the development of the corrective action plan, which we'll be talking about next. So the draft corrective action plan, essentially that's in the process of being developed. Holland is going to submit that draft corrective action plan for our review and approval. The draft CAP, or the corrective action plan, all short for long for CAP, excuse me, we refer to it as a CAP, summarizes all the historical and recently collected data results in comprehensive tables and associated plan and cross-section figures to showing the locations of the impacts. The draft CAP will also propose potential remedial actions for soil and groundwater, and as well as corrective actions such as vapor mitigation engineering controls to address impacts in soil vapor. Holland anticipates to submit the draft for our review in May or June of 2021, so next month or the following month, which then will be available for public comment for 30 days once we initially review it. We'll initially review it and then give them the go-ahead to start the 30-day public comment period. Once the 30-day public comment period ends, then we'll incorporate any comments that we receive into our final comments. Next slide. So the planned remedial actions, again, these are in development, but for soil, this would include the excavation of impacted soil up to 10 feet. That's pretty deep, especially for shallow impacts that we're seeing in metal. But this is also it's to remediate, but it's also to install footings, mat slab footings that are going to go down to 10 feet as well. That impacted soil will then be hauled off site to an approved disposal facility that will be approved by us, or it could be reused in terms of consolidating and capping on site under hardscapes such as foundation. There is a groundwater component of the draft CAP, I think groundwater is pretty shallow here. It's anywhere between 3 to 7 feet. They're proposing to do essentially a pump and treat. So if they do encounter groundwater, they'll be pumping it out, treating it, and then discharging it to the sanitary sewer. And this last point here is it's a good point to kind of really talk about and really emphasize. So not only is it to address potentially impacted soil early in the construction phase, that way, that remediation and corrective action phase is not getting in the way of the construction, but it's really to mitigate and to remove a lot of the contamination so the surrounding community or construction workers are not exposed to it. Next slide, thank you. There's also a soil vapor component of this. We call them vapor mitigation engineering controls. They consist of numerous things. This would include a vapor barrier. So you can see this blue kind of plastic that's laid is a vapor barrier. There's also spray-on applications. It may include a passive or active subslab ventilation system, which would be essentially pipes that would go underneath the foundation that have holes in them that would capture potentially contaminated soil vapor and then get it away from the building. So to mitigate the risk of vapor intrusion. And then you also have for potential offsite impacts, you have trench dams, and those are to block potential vapors that are traveling along utility corridors that could be entering the site. So what are the protection of the community? So what are the exposure pathways? Well, there are a couple receptors that could be potentially exposed. Those are the construction workers who are working within the contaminated area. And then there's the potential offsite receptors. And how could they be exposed? Well, they could have ingestion, they could have dermal contact, or they could have inhalation of particles, and that would be dust kicking up from like the big yellow equipment that's rolling around site. So basically, we require pretty strict requirements and protection measures, which we're going to talk about in the next slide, which will be implemented by Holland and their environmental consultant during all remedial corrective action phases at the site. So these are a few of the requirements that will be required once the CAP is being implemented. And that's to ready the construction zone by either removing the contaminated source area or capping or importing clean fill to mitigate inhalation to construction workers and the surrounding community. There's real-time continuous dust and air monitoring, which will have a full-time environmental professional on site during all work hours to monitor dust. Usually there's dust stations on all four corners of the site and entrance and exit areas of the site, as well as up gradient. And if dust is visually seen or sensors around the property detect dust above a certain threshold, which is usually PM 2.5 or PM 10, then construction activities are halted until additional dust mitigation measures are implemented. The results of the air monitoring will be uploaded weekly to GeoTracker for the public to see. There will also be weekly status reports that follow those air monitoring data. There's on-site dust management. So you have dust suppression with the use of water trucks that spray water to mitigate, dust going into the air. You have soil stockpile management, That would be the covering and stockpiles with the thick plastic and sandbags before the soil is characterized or removed off-site. If preferred, we do like to see direct load, which would be direct load of impacted soil into a truck to minimize just the amount of stockpiles on site. You have equipment and personnel and truck decontamination. We'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. You'll have site security and fencing around the entire property. And then you'll have an inspection of public off-site streets adjacent to the site, things of that nature. And then lastly, you'll have clearly visible placards to reference phone numbers of Nash Holland as well as us, who can be reached during those if a dust complaint is given. There's also usually the construction company will also have a log of complaints as well. Next slide. So for the truck management and route kind of requirements, a lot of these are done with the city of Oakland. However, with the truck management, we don't want to see, trucks idling for a long time or lining up along the streets. Obviously, we want to prevent track out. So you can see this gentleman right here scraping the tires of a truck. And that is to prevent the spread of potentially impacted soil off-site. The use of trained drivers that know the certain truck routes and how to enter and exit the site based on, the city of Oakland's kind of requirements. And then lastly, which we've kind of run into by having multiple community meetings is construction work and parking. Where's the construction workers who are going to be working on site, where are they going to be parking? And then you'll have communications. I think I briefly touched on this in 2 slides before, but you'll have site signage with contact information. That'll have my information on there. That'll have Nash Holland's information on there. And then you'll also be able to view weekly status reports, which will have the air monitoring results, as well as kind of downloads of what's going on at the site and the timelines in terms of, if the excavation was happening, then, how much excavation, how much soil was removed and things of that nature. It's a good way to kind of check up on the site. And those will be posted to the State Water Board's GeoTracker website. So for the schedule, as I mentioned, there's additional investigation work currently underway. Nash Holland is proposing to submit the draft cap for our review and approval in late May, early June. Once we initially comment on that, we will ask Nash Holland to then open it up for public comment for a 30-day public comment period. That'll be conducted in the summer of 2021. We'll have a similar fact sheet that will be distributed to the community, letting them know that they can comment for a 30-day period on the cap. And then the remedial excavation is slated to happen in late August and early June, and then construction will start in fourth quarter 2021. And then obviously communications will be ongoing. In the next slide, I'll let Tracy kind of talk on that slide.
Sure, thank you. So just in terms of communications, the Water Board maintains a website called GeoTracker, and you can take a picture of it with your phone right there. John will also put it in the chat box for us, and you can access all of the technical reports and fact sheets on that link. If you have questions, you can call one of the two people for environmental questions. You can call me. I'm available nights and weekends as well, and I answer my cell phone. Or you can, and my cell phone number is right there. You can also call Drew. That's his work number, and he does get back to folks. And then just for the redevelopment, you can of course call Kevin Ma. I think most of you here know him, and he will also answer the phone if you have questions. So I think that concludes our presentation for the evening, and we'd like to open it up for questions and answers. The one last thing I'd like to say, if somebody didn't make it to this meeting and wants to look at this presentation, it will also be uploaded to GeoTracker by tomorrow. So I will open it up for questions. And again, you can raise your hand. You can just unmute yourself and talk. There's just a few of us here, or put something in the chat box as well. I'm going to give it a couple minutes, and if we don't have any questions, I'll close the meeting in short order. But first of all, just allow people to either unmute themselves or think if they have any questions they'd like to ask.
I have one question. This is Mark.
Hey, Mark. Thank you for saving us.
I was thinking about the truck idling. You know, in the other construction projects, sometimes I would see trucks idling for longer than whatever 5 minutes, or they'd sit there for 5 minutes anyways. And then, but I would also, if there is some issue where they're like all lined up, they would just, you know, they would all be idling because, oh, they have to move every couple, you know, every 4 minutes they're moving because the next truck has now dropped off some, you know, whatever it is, cement, or picked up some dirt or something. So the end result is you have 20 trucks all idling while they're waiting to pick up some dirt. And I just kind of feel like, well, maybe there should be another way of dealing with that.
I think that's actually going to be a question for Kevin, if I'm not mistaken. Kevin, am I right? That's really a construction coordination question.
Yeah, I can handle it. And then Mark, I don't know if you've met Steve Ness yet, but he's kind of one of our senior construction directors, and he can chime in as well. But I think to your point, typically when we have those situations where we do have a lot of trucks that need to come in and pour concrete or grab soil, we will be operating under the City of Oakland's CMP, the Construction Management Plan. And part of that plan requires those staging trucks to find an off-site area to stage that is kind of away from any kind of housing area. So they'll typically be like at a freeway underpass, or they'll be kind of at an area of town that is less densely populated, but also, you know, a few minutes drive in. And then those trucks will typically get radioed in on a, you know, like you mentioned, on a 5 minute or 10 minute or whatever 15-minute basis. So it's kind of a real-time staging and delivering process, as opposed to kind of having them all line up at the site itself and create that kind of concern, you know, from all those trucks being there. Steve, did I miss anything on that front?
No, I think you nailed it. That's the description. These are smaller, tighter urban sites as well. So it's not beneficial for us. And a lot of times we don't have room for staging the trucks, which also helps solve the problem. And as Kevin describes, the sequencing of how we want to receive them. While we are placing concrete, there's typically a few lined up against the pump and probably one maneuvering. And with how those trucks run, the engine does need to be running to power the trucks while they're placing concrete. But for other staging of deliveries and trucks, they should not be on site staging. That's something, as Kevin mentioned, we'll follow the CMP plan and adhere to, you know, enforcing those rules to the trucks on site.
Hey, and then Mark, one more thing to add. We are going to be hosting a community meeting next month. It's looking like it's going to be May 17th, where we are specifically addressing our construction management plan. So we're going to be presenting kind of various elements of it and getting feedback from the community. So definitely would appreciate if you could kind of join in on that one. I'll be sending out an email blast and sending out some mailers here in the next week or so. But that is a separate meeting that we will have to go into more detail on that side of our project.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Kevin, you also mentioned that you'll have a number posted that people can call during the actual construction if they're experiencing issues, right? So that will be posted.
Yes. Yeah. Typically, Steve, is our superintendent that will be.
It's our lead superintendent for the project, and we do our best to post his cell phone, and we'll have direct contact with him.
Perfect. Okay. Other questions? Thanks, Mark. I'm going to give it another minute, and
I guess I'll ask one more then. I mean,
okay.
I looked at some of the materials, and I thank you for your presentation, but I don't really get like a sense of like, okay, there's some vapors that are potentially dangerous, but what is the real risk or harms here? Or do you know what I mean? I don't get a sense of like, should I be afraid or should I not be afraid? You know, I don't understand.
Well, yeah, I can take a stab at that question. There is impacts in soil, but the good thing is that they're going to be excavating down to 10 feet. So they'll be removing a lot of the impacts. Those impacts, like I said, are pretty standard across Alameda County, especially Oakland. The metal impacts, the chlorinated solvent impacts, as well as the petroleum hydrocarbon impacts. You know, you get petroleum hydrocarbons from home heating oil tanks. The metals, obviously, like I mentioned before, paint and aerial deposition from cars using leaded gasoline, you know, before the 70s. And then with the VOCs, you do have chlorinateds. So, you know, a lot of that source material in soil will be removed. The groundwater, there's less likely of an impact of community members, you know, coming in contact with the groundwater. And then with the vapor, again, you know, with the excavation of 10 feet, the likelihood of removing the source area is high. But again, I can't comment on that until the additional investigations are done and they've adequately delineated potential impacts on site.
Did that answer your question, Mark?
Well, not exactly, but you know, it's what you.
I think the question is, does he need to be concerned? And my understanding, and I'm not technical, but I've been doing this for a long time, is that they're cleaning up the site to provide long-term protection of the public. And there's two things. So there's vapors that can sometimes make their way in the indoor air, and they're going to engineer that away. And then when you're excavating, and Drew, correct me if I'm mistaken, when they're excavating, those solvents like to dissolve, like to evaporate and find equilibrium. So it's really not a concern for people when they're excavating either, because it's open air and they'll just dissipate, sort of like gasoline fumes will.
Correct.
Did that answer it a little more? So
yeah, sure. I mean, maybe this isn't about the project. I could throw this question in there. Is, you know, I live in a house that's across the street. It's probably been impacted by, you know, leaded gasoline deposits in my soil too. And who knows if there's the same bad groundwater underneath my house. Is it something that I would be concerned about, having vapors come up through my basement, or, you know, things like that? I mean, I just don't know, because, you look at a report and it says something like there's metals in the soil, and here's a percentage of, per billion, but that means nothing to me. I'm not an expert in the field.
Right. There's metals in soil all over in Oakland. So as long as it's not getting kicked up and it's remaining in place, then it shouldn't be an issue. Once construction happens, or if construction happens at a site, especially a site like this that had service stations or had previous, residential on it, and that then kicks that dust up in the air. That's when we get concerned, and we want to know where those impacts are.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, going once. Twice. Okay, I think that will conclude our presentation for tonight. Again, if you have questions, you can call anybody on this. You can refer to GeoTracker. This will be uploaded to this presentation will be uploaded to the GeoTracker website tomorrow. And I am going to remain on the line just for a couple minutes longer in case somebody wants to have a question but didn't want to say it, and I'm going to let everybody else go. So thanks, Drew, for your time. Thanks, Kevin, Steve. I'm going to say Victoria, but I think it's Anna. You guys can go. Thanks so much now. I'm just going to remain for a couple more minutes.